We were looking into the earthwork sites of southern Ohio, the standard material, the places historians usually point to, when we came across a detail we did not know what to do with. A country club has been operating a private golf course on top of the largest geometric earthwork in the world since 1910. The public is allowed in 4 days a year to watch the moonrise. That stopped us. We kept pulling the thread. 13 sites later, here is what we found. We did not expect to find a village in suburban Dayton where the entire layout, every house, every post, every gate, was designed as a solar calendar. We did not expect to find a burial mound with a nuclear weapons laboratory across the street. We did not expect to find 2 stones inscribed in Hebrew sitting in an Ohio mound, and a theory about why someone put them there that is more interesting than the stones themselves. But the one that made us feel like we had to make this video, that is number 1. Stay with us. If you want to follow along when we find things like this, subscribe. There is always another thread to pull. Today we are counting down 13 ancient sites in Ohio that still don't make sense. Number 13, Flint Ridge, Licking County. There is an 8-mile vein of flint in the hills of eastern Ohio that people have been walking to for at least 12,000 years. Not because they lived there, because the rock was extraordinary. The Vanport flint at Flint Ridge comes in white, blue, red, green, deep purple honeygold, all in the same formation, and the Hopewell culture in particular treated it as something close to sacred. They carried it in baskets across hundreds of miles. Here is the detail that gets researchers. Dozens of high-quality flint sources exist across North America. None was traded as widely as this. 1. Geochemists can now fingerprint any piece of Ohio flint to its specific quarry pit. A precision that revealed that a single arrowhead found in a Louisiana burial mound was quarried from a particular hillside in Ohio, more than 800 miles away. The preserve is still there, 533 acres open to the public, hundreds of ancient quarry pits visible from the trails. The museum is built directly over a quarry floor. You can look through glass at the workshop where someone stood 2,000 years ago and chose a piece of stone to carry south. Number 12. Sunwatch Indian Village, Dayton. In 1971, the city of Dayton began planning an incinerator on a stretch of land along the Great Miami River. Salvage archaeology started before construction. It did not finish for 17 years, because what was underneath the ground was the most complete Fort Ancient village known to science. The village was occupied around 1150 to 1450 CE, most intensively for about 20 years. When archaeologists mapped the post holes in the soil, they found 19 structures arranged in a half circle around a 200-foot central plaza. The entire layout, the houses, the plaza, the stockade's entrance gate, was oriented to the solar calendar with the precision of a modern almanac. The posts at the center cast shadows that marked equinoxes, solstices, planting times, harvest times. The city changed its plans. The village is now an open-air museum at 2301 West River Road. The reconstructed structures stand on their original 13th century foundations. The reason the community abandoned the site after roughly 20 years, without apparent crisis, is not known. Number 11. The Newark Holy Stones, Licking County. In June 1860, David Wyrick, the surveyor for Licking County, was excavating within the ancient earthworks near Newark, Ohio, when he found a stone inscribed in Hebrew. 5 months later, he found another. The second one depicted a bearded man in a turban and robe, surrounded by what translated as a condensed version of the Ten Commandments. Professional scientists denounced both finds almost immediately. Wyrick published woodcuts of the inscriptions a year later and made at least 38 significant errors in 256 letters, which suggested strongly that he had not carved the stones himself. The leading scholarly theory, developed by archaeologist Brad Lepper, is that the stones were deliberate forgeries planted where Wyrick would find them, crafted to prove that ancient Hebrews had reached Ohio, and therefore that Native Americans, Jews, and Europeans all descended from common ancestors. The year was 1860. The country was 12 months from the Civil War. Proving common human ancestry had political consequences that were not subtle. Here's the detail that stopped us. The Decalogue stone looks nearly identical to a Babylonian figure in a popular 1850s archaeology book called Discoveries in the Ruins of Nineveh and Babylon. That book was in the library at Kenyon College. The chief suspect studied at Kenyon College, Both stones are on permanent display at the Johnson Humrick House Museum in Coshocton. The museum now presents them as forgeries. It also tells you why someone made them, which turns out to be the more interesting story. Number 10. Alligator Mound, Granville. Ohio has two effigy mounds, earthen sculptures shaped like animals, visible as a form only from above. The second one is in a residential neighborhood in Granville, at the end of a suburban cul-de-sac called Brindue Drive. You park on the street and walk up through someone's neighborhood to find it. It is 240 feet long, 76 feet wide, and 4 to 6 feet high. It has 4 limbs, a round head, and a long curling tail. European settlers named it Alligator Mound. Alligators do not live in Ohio. The name came from a translation problem. Settlers asked local Native Americans what the figure represented. They were told it was a fierce creature that lived in the water and had a long tail, and sometimes ate people. The settlers said, alligator. What they were actually being told about was the underwater panther, Mishepeshu in Ojibwe, a supernatural figure from Eastern woodland tradition associated with whirlpools, the underworld, and the dangerous depths of rivers and lakes. A 1999 excavation dated the mound to approximately AD 950 to 1270. The clay used to build it was imported from elsewhere. It is not native to the hilltop. A stone altar once sat at the mound's midsection, with evidence of repeated burning. Its stones were removed in the mid-1800s to build the foundation of a private home. The mound is on the National Register of Historic Places. No fee, no fence. Just a sacred effigy in a neighborhood, mostly unknown. Number 9. Miamisburg Mound, Miamisburg. A suburban street called Mound Road in Miamisburg, just south of Dayton, ends at a 65-foot prehistoric pyramid. It is the largest in eastern North America. It was built by the Adena culture, beginning around 800 BCE and continuing for roughly 900 years. The construction method matters here. When an Adena leader died, the community built a wooden mortuary house around the body, filled it with copper and ceremonial objects, and set it on fire. Then they piled dirt on top. The next leader who died, the same process. Layer by layer, fire by fire, the mound grew taller across 30 generations. An 1869 excavation dug a vertical shaft from summit to base and found exactly 2 burials, one in a bark-covered tomb 8 feet from the top, another in a log vault 28 feet below that. The entire mound has never been systematically excavated, 54,000 cubic yards of earth, and archaeologists have seen perhaps 10% of what is inside. Directly across the street from the mound stands Mound Laboratory, a nuclear weapons research facility that began as part of the Manhattan Project and produced plutonium triggers for hydrogen bombs. The ancient and the apocalyptic share a zip code in Miamisburg, Ohio. 116 concrete steps lead to the summit. Free parking. No admission. Number 8. Marietta Earthworks, Marietta. In 1788, the first permanent American settlement in the Northwest Territory was established at the confluence of the Muskingum and Ohio rivers. The settlers who built it had arrived from New England, and they were educated people. When they encountered the earthworks already there, one of the 3 largest Hopewell complexes in prehistoric North America, they named the structures in Latin and passed the first preservation law west of the Appalachians to protect them. The Sacravia was a ceremonial pathway, 680 feet long and 150 feet wide, flanked by 20-foot earthen walls, aligned with the winter solstice sunset to within fractions of a degree. The quadrangle was a flat-topped pyramidal mound with 4 ramps. The Capitolium was a smaller pyramid. The conus was a burial mound 30 feet high, still standing today in an active cemetery where Revolutionary War veterans are buried among Hopewell dead. The preservation law did not hold. By 1882, the Sacravia had been quarried for brickmaking. The clay that once formed a solar-aligned ceremonial boulevard became the building material for the town that replaced it. Here's the detail that stopped us. The Capitolium mound survived because a library was built directly on top of it in 1916. One of the ancient pyramidal ramps now serves as the front entrance staircase. You climb an Adena pyramid to return your books. Number 7. Seip Earthworks, Ross County. A single green mound rises from a flat field along US Route 50 near Bainbridge, Ohio. It is 240 feet long, 160 feet wide, 30 feet high. Behind it, you can see the ghost outlines of the enclosure that once surrounded it. 121 acres of embankment walls, maintained now by interpretive mowing. Everything else was plowed into the ground by farming. When excavators opened Seip Mound between 1925 and 1928, they found 122 burials, thousands of freshwater pearls, copper from Isle Royale and Lake Superior, mica from North Carolina, obsidian blades, and effigy pipes made in a style native to the Tennessee River Valley, 300 miles away. The site was so rich that archaeologists named it the Valley of the Kings. They also found cloth, fragments of fabric woven from milkweed fiber, with a geometric circle pattern preserved between copper breastplates. The cloth still showed its design after 2,000 years. A 1971 excavation near the mound found post-impressions of a craftsman's workshop, a building where the burial goods appear to have been made, mica fragments, flint knives, pottery, animal bones. Someone set up a studio at what was essentially one of the most important pilgrimage destinations on the continent. The mound is the only one in Hopewell Culture National Historical Park that visitors can climb. Free admission. Always open. Number 6. Spruce Hill Works, Ross County. The largest Hopewell hilltop enclosure ever found is not one of the famous ones. It does not have a visitor center. It is not on most itineraries. It sits on a 400-foot mesa in the Paint Creek Valley, Ross County, and most people who drive past it do not know it is there. Spruce Hill encloses 140 acres. Its walls stretch over 2.25 miles and are built of stone, not earth like most Hopewell enclosures. Stone, one of only 2 or 3 Hopewell sites known to have used stone construction at all. Here is the detail that does not have an explanation. At approximately 30 locations along those walls, the sandstone rocks have been vitrified, fused, glazed. The soil beneath them is also vitrified. Sandstone does not vitrify from a campfire. It takes sustained temperatures approaching 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit to do what was done to those rocks. The heat evidence was first noted in 1811, investigated by Squire and Davis in 1847, confirmed by National Park Service excavations in 1995 and 1996, still unexplained. Ceremonial burning, industrial metalworking, something else entirely. No one can say. The site was nearly auctioned as private land in 2008. The Arc of Appalachia intervened to purchase it. Access requires contact with them in advance. The mesa is visible from the valley below, and from the top of the mesa, you can see the Seip Earthworks. Number 5. Fort Ancient Earthworks, Warren County. 3.5 miles of earthen walls, over 100 acres enclosed, a bluff 270 feet above the Little Miami River Gorge, the largest prehistoric hilltop enclosure in North America, and approximately 70 openings in those walls. Early American settlers looked at Fort Ancient and said, "Fort. Obvious, right? Walls. High ground." It was named accordingly. Then archaeologists looked closer. A defensive wall with 70 gaps is not a defensive wall. The ditch, the feature you would put outside a fortification to slow attackers, runs along the inside of the wall here, not the outside. Not one artifact found at the site suggests warfare, weapon stockpiles, or anything that would make sense if this were a military installation. The site was built by the Hopewell culture between approximately 200 BCE and 400 CE, in at least 3 stages over roughly 400 years. The walls required an estimated 553,000 cubic yards of earth, moved with deer shoulder blades, split elk antlers, clamshell hoes, and baskets. 4 limestone-capped mounds inside the enclosure align with the summer solstice sunrise and the winter solstice sunrise. Evidence suggests the builders also understood the 18.6-year lunar cycle. The name is wrong in 2 directions. It was not built by the Fort Ancient culture. The Fort Ancient culture, a completely different people, arrived centuries later after the Hopewell had disappeared and settled inside the enclosure around AD 1000. The site is named after people who inherited the ruins, not the people who built them. Here's the detail that keeps coming up in the research. Archaeologists excavating the interior in 2006 found a feature called the Moorhead Circle, a ring of timber posts around a central pit containing bright red-orange soil that had been burned somewhere else and carefully transported to this location. Nothing like it has been found at any other Hopewell site in the world. Archaeologist Robert Riordan described it simply, "We know of nothing else like it in the Hopewell world. The site is open, museum, trails, the gorge overlook. You can walk the walls. You can try to count the openings." The site became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2023, one of 8 Hopewell sites inscribed together. It is still named wrong. Number 4. Mound City, Chillicothe. To reach it, you drive Ohio Route 104 north out of Chillicothe, passing between 2 state prisons. Then you turn into a national park. Mound City is a group of 23 earthen mounds, enclosed within a roughly square earthen wall, 4 miles from Chillicothe along the Scioto River. The Hopewell culture built it over 400 years, between approximately 200 BCE and 500 CE. Each mound was raised over a charnel house, a mortuary building where the dead were cremated. The building burned, the ashes covered with earth. Each mound is a burial. The complex has been described as a place believed by its builders to be a portal to the afterlife. The 1840s excavations by archaeologists Squire and Davis recovered spectacular artifacts from inside the mounds: effigy pipes, copper figures, mica blankets that shimmered like silver foil, obsidian from Yellowstone, shells from the Gulf of Mexico. Many of those artifacts were sent to private collectors and international museums. A significant portion are now in the British Museum. In 1917, the U.S. Army built Camp Sherman, a World War I training base, directly on the site. The mounds were leveled, all but the largest. Soldiers took additional artifacts as souvenirs. After the war, the camp was dismantled. The mounds were reconstructed between 1920 and 1922, based on the detailed surveys Squire and Davis had made 70 years earlier. Here's the thing. The reconstruction is accurate. The original drawings were good enough. The mounds standing at Mound City today are within a few inches of the specifications made before the Army arrived. What you are looking at is a faithful reproduction of something that was destroyed. Mound City is the only fully restored Hopewell site in North America. Free admission. UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2023. The Visitor Center has artifact replicas, since the originals are in London. Mound 13 contained the cremated remains of 20 people, the most found in any single mound at the complex. The site is quiet in the way that only places of the dead get to be quiet. If you are following this rabbit hole with us, drop a like. It helps more people find these stories. And let us know in the comments if any of these places are familiar to you. Sometimes our viewers have been there, sometimes they grew up there. We read everything. Number 3. Newark Earthworks, Newark and Heath. The largest set of geometric earthwork enclosures in the world originally covered more than 4 square miles of central Ohio. The Hopewell culture built them between 100 BCE and 400 CE. The complex included a great circle 1,200 feet in diameter, an octagon large enough to contain 4 Roman colosseums, a square, an ellipse, parallel walls connecting the pieces across miles of landscape. Less than 10% of it survives. The city of Newark was built on top of the rest. In 1982, physicist Ray Hively and philosopher Robert Horn published research demonstrating that the octagon earthworks encodes all 8 key positions of the moon during its 18.6-year major standstill cycle, the slow northward and southward drift of the moonrise across the horizon that takes nearly 2 decades to complete. The alignment accuracy is sub-degree. The Ohio History Connection's archaeologists describe the earthwork as twice as precise as Stonehenge in its astronomical alignments. Though Stonehenge's status as an observatory is itself debated, the geometry goes further. The octagon contains a perfect square. The area of that square equals the area of the Great Circle. The circumference of the Great Circle equals the perimeter of the right square. These relationships are not coincidences at this scale. They were built in. In 1910, a country club leased the octagon portion and built a golf course on it. The Mound Builders Country Club has maintained that lease, operating between the ancient walls since then. The Ohio History Connection owns the land. The lease runs until 2078. The public is allowed inside the golf course 4 days a year, timed to specific moonrise events. On the nights when the moon reaches its northernmost standstill position, once every 18.6 years, it rises within 1/2 of 1 degree of the octagon's exact center axis, as observed from the observatory mound inside the enclosure. Hopewell skywatchers had to observe the moon across multiple generations to build something that precise. Artifacts found here include obsidian from Yellowstone, copper from the Great Lakes, shark teeth from the Atlantic coast. The Great Circle is open daily, free. The golf course is open when the club decides. Number 2. Serpent Mound, Adams County. The world's largest serpent effigy coils for 1,348 feet. Its tail is wound 3 times. Its body makes 7 curves. Its head opens wide around a large oval, which may be an egg or the sun or an eye or something no one has correctly named yet. There is no agreement on who built it or when. Radiocarbon analysis, published in 2014 and corroborated in 2019, suggests the mound was first constructed approximately 2,300 years ago, during the Adena period, and then repaired or rebuilt about 1,100 years ago by the Ford ancient culture. The lead researcher at the Ohio History Connection, Brad Lepper, disputes this on methodological grounds, arguing the Ford ancient culture, which is the one known to have built effigy mounds, is the more likely builder, and that the dating samples were taken from organic sediment rather than reliable charcoal. As of 2026, the debate has not been resolved. The mound sits on the edge of a 300-million-year-old impact crater approximately 5 miles across. The Serpent Mound disturbance, it is called, the eroded remains of a catastrophic event that blew apart more than 7 cubic miles of rock. The serpent's head is positioned at the edge of the central uplift zone. Whether the people who built it knew what was beneath the ground is unknown. The head aligns with the summer solstice sunset. The coils suggest other seasonal alignments. Researchers describe the geometry as tantalizingly inexact, precise enough to be intentional, imprecise enough to resist confident interpretation. Harvard University purchased the land in the late 19th century to save the mound from further deterioration, then transferred it to the Ohio Historical Society in 1900. It was briefly the most improbable piece of Harvard real estate in America. The site is managed by the Arc of Appalachia. A small admission fee, an observation tower, walking trails around the effigy. The serpent does not give anything away. Number 1. The Hopewell Collapse. Imagine driving through southern Ohio in late afternoon, when the light is low and the shadows are long. The fields are flat. The hills roll gently. And then there is a mound in someone's field, a grass-covered dome 30 feet high that has been there for 2,000 years. You pass another one. You turn a corner and there's an earthen wall, barely visible, running along the tree line. Then another mound, this one in a city park, this one beneath a library. This is what southern Ohio looks like once you know what to look for. The Hopewell are everywhere, and nowhere. The Hopewell culture flourished from approximately 100 BCE to 500 CE, 600 years. They were not a centralized civilization. They had no cities, no writing, no evidence of kings or armies. They were, as far as archaeologists can tell, largely hunter-gatherers and small-scale farmers who lived in family homesteads scattered across the river valleys. And yet they built the Newark Earthworks, the largest geometric monument in the ancient Americas. They built Mound City, a mortuary complex described as a portal between worlds. They maintained a trade network that ran from Yellowstone to the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes to the Carolinas, a system of exchange so sophisticated that obsidian from a Wyoming volcano wound up buried in a mound in Ohio, and copper from an island in Lake Superior wound up in a burial in a mound in Ross County. Around 400 to 500 CE, it stopped. Earthwork construction ceased. The long-distance trade network collapsed. The characteristic art forms, the mica cutouts, the effigy pipes, disappeared from the archaeological record. Archaeologists call this the Hopewell Collapse. The proposed explanations include climate change, disruption of trade routes, disease, social restructuring. None has been confirmed. None has been ruled out. The people did not vanish. Late woodland cultures continued in the same region. Some of today's federally recognized tribes, including the Shawnee and the Delaware, acknowledge the Hopewell as ancestral to some of their people. What ended was not the people. What ended was the system. The pilgrimage culture, the monument building, the trade network, the elaborate mortuary rites. All of it stopped more or less at once, across hundreds of miles. Here's the wild part. The culture we spent this entire video discussing does not actually have a name. The Hopewell people called themselves something. We do not know what. We named them after a 19th century Ohio farmer, Mordecai Hopewell, on whose land some of their burial mounds happen to sit. The most sophisticated astronomical monument in the Americas was built by people whose name we invented. Everything on this list is what they left. The mounds, the walls, the alignments, the puzzles, we have their geometry, we have their trade goods, we have the shadows their buildings cast in the soil. We do not have them. There are more threads. There always are. If we had to name a personal favorite from this list, it is the Newark Earthworks. Specifically the fact that people fought for decades to get a golf course designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and they won. Which of these 13 surprised you most? And where should we go next? Subscribe if you want to follow along when we find things like this.